Welcome to Screen Quest, a podcast where a fellowship of film lovers and armchair movie experts plays film roulette. I'm one of your hosts, Chris from Jacksonville, joined by May, also from Jacksonville.
Hi.
And we have Will from Greenville, South Carolina.
Hey.
I don't know why I left everyone's last name out, but Waterman, Finch, and Rotondi, if you want it.
I thought you were saying that my name is also from Jacksonville. That's my last name.
Yeah, absolutely. On today's episode, we will be talking about Equilibrium, the sci-fi dystopian action thriller starring Christian Bale. And, we will be discussing how it either successfully or unsuccessfully navigates the sci-fi dystopian genre. We drew the card last week for Deja Vu, which is all about paying homage to former films or popular genres. But first, what have you guys been up to in your viewings? Anybody seen anything interesting lately? Been watching anything cool?
I've been obsessed with Our Flag Means Death, which I know I've talked to both of you about at this point, but it's great. I'm sure everyone's telling you that, but go watch it if you haven't.
It is stupendous. Yes, we're not quite done with it. Like we're like we savor our shows. We're not bingers, admittedly, but it's something a little to look forward to each week to kind of navigate through like 6 or 7 shows like in a week. And I agree wholeheartedly. Just a wonderful, wonderful show with a lot of depth that you might not expect. Taika Waititi has a knack for being very silly. It is that in spades, but it has a lot of depth and heart. So do you have a favorite character?
Oh God. Jim, probably.
Yeah.
Jim is great.
Amazing. All right. I like that you're being a little coy there. That's cool. Yes. I appreciate our audience will appreciate that too if they start the show. And
there's nothing surprising about Jim. They're a very normal character, and
indeed, yeah. Just really funny and exciting. You gotta watch the show to find out why. It's a great little teaser. Thanks for that. How about you, Will?
Oh man, I've been on the Stranger Things bandwagon with my wife lately. So we're probably about 6 or 7 episodes in. And she's the one who keeps telling me like every day, like, can we watch more? And I'm like, I got a few other things to do. But yeah, like we're almost to the point where I feel like she'll probably finish it before I know it. And then I'll just go back and rewatch it with her at some point. But yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Very nice. You're a little ahead of us. I think we've only done 2 so far, but I'm determined to catch up before like the finale, like couple of episodes drop in July. I love the Nightmare on Elm Street vibes. Like that kind of other people can't fully see what's going on, and there's like your fears and things kind of like you're in that in between spot. Not really sure what's happening there, but it very much reminded me of Nightmare on Elm Street, and I am digging it, man. And I know there's a certain song that has gotten very popular again after many years thanks to that show, so I can't wait to encounter whatever scene that plays in. I'm guessing a montage, like based on nothing other than Stranger Things history. But
excellent. Well, then I'm not going to ruin anything for you, and I will just let you enjoy it. But it is, yeah, it's I like how it's consistently been entertaining, and I've enjoyed the 80s, but I would love to just, I don't know, because I know there's a lot of things about the 80s that obviously were not perfect, but just the aesthetic part of it, just for some reason, I enjoy just going back and watching all of the, whether it's the technology or if it's just like the looks, like how everything is dressed up for the sake of the show. I really get into that.
I think they do 80s nostalgia very well in that show, where it's like, it's very clearly in the 80s, but it stops short of being like 80s. Like it feels natural, I guess is what I'm saying. Like They really like nailed that like Amblin Entertainment, like Spielberg era, like Goonies and all that other stuff. And this season's been particularly dark and violent. So I'm cool that they're embracing like the characters are grown up. We can have higher stakes and all that stuff. I think that's a smart choice as well.
Well, I don't know if like they're still doing this, but a couple years ago before the pandemic, I went to a secret cinema event that was basically a like recreated version of Hawkins. And you paid to go, you're assigned a dress code. So everyone has had like period clothing, and you go, there's lots of activities you can do, or you can just kind of enjoy living in Hawkins for a night. And they have actors that are lookalikes for all the main characters, and they'll act out scenes from the show. It's really cool. So I don't know if they're still doing Stranger Things, but Highly
just made me
recommend.
insanely jealous, like insanely when we were in England. I was specifically looked to see if they had any productions or things that they had done, because they had done like Back to the Future,
Oh yeah.
Ghostbusters. They've done just so many great things, and like the feedback is always really phenomenal. So thanks for making me very jealous. I appreciate it, May.
Anytime.
That's awesome. I'll definitely have to check that out.
I think as far as like TV shows go, it's pretty much the same with me with the two shows that you named. Better Call Saul, I'm just waiting for the second half of that to come out. That's been very good. That was kind of the thing that we were watching like week to week. Oh, Kenobi, I guess.
I was gonna say, yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not seen the most recent episode, which has kind of a mixed reaction, but the first three were very, very good. Continue to enjoy the show. It's just really nice to see Ian McGregor back, and like he's brought such gravitas to that character, and like I like that he's not phoning it in. Like it's very clear that like he took the assignment to heart and wants to do, you know, like give it his all, right? Like put it 100% of his heart into it, which is really, really nice.
Can I just say that I don't know if I mentioned this before, so I apologize if this is me repeating myself, but I felt like watching Ewan McGregor, like his portrayal of Obi-Wan was like the one I felt like he was a man who looked haunted by the fact that he thought he killed his best friend or thought that he killed his brother. Like that sort of PTSD, like I bought into that. There's a lot of sequel or I guess prequel stuff that's come out to different shows, movies over the years where I feel like the hero often becomes like that cantankerous, like disheartened old man that I didn't really enjoy. But this is like that one moment where I can buy into that, where I feel like the trauma he's gone through makes sense for why he is the way he is in that show. So
yeah, I mean, you saw a lot of it on screen. I think that's partly why, because I feel like with a lot of like that character type, that whatever trauma they experienced is just like maybe a brief flashback you see on screen, whereas it's like if you've seen all the prequels and stuff, you've been right there with him as everything happened.
Yep.
Yeah, it like having kind of the natural space of like the time from when the prequels came out to when the show's coming out, I think works in its favor as well, right? Like I don't know how well the show would have worked if they had done it, say, like 2 years after the prequel, like, you know, prequels were first released. I think having a little bit of distance really, really helps kind of drive the point home, and you're kind of sold more on like where the character is at that, you know, 10 years later or whatever it's supposed to be. So cool. Well, let's have a side quest, shall we? Wrong file. But I did see the category. All right. So if you film it, they will come is our side quest. And our caption, since this is a new side quest, is the following: talk about a movie you knew was there simply to do fan service and discuss whether you think it stuck the landing. There's a really good one that we just talked about last week that's in theater still. Talk about that. Does anybody have
totally
anything
talk
else?
About that?
No. That's okay. It's too soon.
This might be a hot take. I don't know how passionate people are with their Pixar opinions, but Invincibles 2, or sorry, not Invincibles 2, Incredibles 2.
Very different superhero.
Incredibles 2 really felt like that, because I feel like they made it so explicit that we should be expecting a sequel with the first Incredibles movie. And you know, it had great success when it came out. Whereas with 2, I don't know what like the Rotten Tomatoes is on it. I did not think it was very good by comparison.
Really?
And I felt like it was what they had set up in the first movie to kind of be like the big conflict got wrapped up in the first 2 minutes of the sequel. And then it was just kind of the same old, oh, well, you messed up again, so now superheroes have to be secretive again. And like I did like that Elastigirl got her own like mission plot arc. That was cool. But yeah, it felt very much like, okay, well, we have to make this thing. Let's just mix up the characters and do the same plot.
I've only seen that once and in theaters. I remember having a good time with it. Like I enjoyed it, but I haven't really thought about it since. So like you're probably on the money-ish. Like But I thought it was a good laugh when I saw it in the theaters. Whereas like I've seen the original Incredibles like quite a few times and I really like it. So that's really all I have to offer on that. I remember thinking it was fine when I saw it, but yeah.
Yeah,
How
to be
about you,
clear,
Will?
I don't think it's bad. I just don't think that it did anything that the original movie didn't.
That I
Yeah.
would agree with. Yeah, I think
Mhm.
that is definitely spot on. I think you're 100% correct there. So yeah, I guess if our prompt is like it's there to do fan service, did it stick the landing? Like you would say like no or like is that
I mean, I think it fulfilled the prophecy it laid out for itself by
okay.
Mhm.
saying that it had to have a sequel, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it did anything new, and I certainly don't think it would earn the franchise yet another film.
Hmm.
Mhm.
What about you, Will?
I'm pretty much of the same opinion. Like I thought it looked like visually it was cool, storyline wise, I could follow it. But like from the would I go back and watch it again? I mean, if it's on or available or that's the thing, then yeah, I could go with it. But I don't know if it's something that I would just be in the mood to want to go see specifically, except for maybe Jack Jack. I feel like I always enjoy watching Jack Jack, but yeah.
I wish we'd had even more Jack Jack personally, because that
Hmm.
was another thing that seemed like it was going to be he was going to be a major character in the next film, and he did have a larger role. But I think it would have been cool if the plot was more focused on Jack Jack and the weird mole people that we saw at the end of the first movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose if you compare it to like say Toy Story 2 and 3, and I haven't seen 4, so that's the only reason I'm not mentioning that one as well. I felt like Toy Story 2 and 3 both did very interesting things and have their own unique identity and seem like necessary sequels, or like they justify their existence just by the sheer fact that like they have different agendas from the like rather than retreading the same old like stuff from the original like Toy Story, like that world grows and gets richer like with each sequel. So and 3 made me cry and the Incredibles 2 did not. So there's that.
That's the litmus test. If it makes you cry, we'll come back for more.
I mean, with Pixar and Disney, like Disney Pixar, 100%.
Yeah.
I think
Although
I
I don't
told
know, man. After Up, yeah, I was gonna say, Chris, if you're gonna talk about like that
you.
montage of Up, like that
Yeah.
stuff to me, like I don't want to watch another one of those.
Yeah, I think it was after Hibachi on Thursday. Marianne and I were a little tipsy, and I was like, I just want to watch can we just watch the opening montage? And like, I hadn't even gotten to like the bad bits in that, like, right? Like, I was still in the happy section, and I was already like starting to like choke up, so I knew it was gonna be
Aw.
bad. Yeah, that's just such a beautifully done thing. But yeah, Pixar has the magic. I've heard Coco is like that too, but I haven't seen it. Like people have told me it'll wreck you.
No, I love Coco. It did wreck me. It felt like it had the originality that every single Pixar film used to have, but now it's kind of like one
Which
bit more
Pixar are you
hit
gonna
or miss.
get?
Yeah.
Cars 2 or
Yeah.
or Up? Like, that's fair.
But Coco is great. Highly recommend. If you
Sweet.
have
Well,
to
I think
choose
that's
between Coco and Incredibles 2, go see Coco.
good Coco. Fair play. All right. I will take your word for it for sure. Well, nice pick, May. Thanks for your selection. I dig it.
You're welcome, and I apologize to any hardcore Pixar fans that I've offended.
I don't I think you're safe on that one. I think there are certain movies if you had picked on, they'd be like, no way. But I think that's a safe enough choice. Mr. Rotondi, so your selection, Equilibrium, was drawn last week for our main quest for Deja Vu. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, that rhymed. Yeah, lead us through the discussion of this film. We watched it in a watch party, which was a great time last night. So take it
Oh
away,
yeah.
Will.
Sounds good, man. Well, I guess I'll just recap briefly about the film itself, who's in it, all that good jazz. So Equilibrium is directed by Kurt Wimmer. It was made back in 2002 and stars, as you mentioned already, Christian Bale, Taye Diggs, Angus McFadden, Emily Watson, William Fichtner, and for probably about a solid 10 minutes, give or take, Sean Bean. And for those of you who know Sean Bean, you could probably guess why he's only in there for about 10 minutes, and I'll leave it at that. But the story itself is an amalgamation of a lot of classic dystopian sci-fi. from the literature side of the house. So if you're thinking like Fahrenheit 451, 1984, that's where a lot of the references in the film come from. But we've got a few other ones we can talk about as well. And then it's got a lot of quasi martial arts thrown in there for some awesome spectacle. But Equilibrium takes place after a supposed Third World War, where society is now walled up in a megacity that's run by a totalitarian regime referred to as the Tetragrammaton, led by an individual known as Father. And emotion in all the citizens, or I should say most of the citizens, those who live in, I guess, Libria, the name of the city, have been suppressed through drug therapy as a means of controlling everybody. So we're all docile, happy workers. Well, not even happy. We're just docile workers. We go about our day and we don't cause trouble, is essentially where they're trying to get society to be at. And anybody who doesn't comply with that, who misses their dose and wants to feel any sort of emotion, is hunted down by specialized law enforcement known as clerics. And Christian Bale plays one of those clerics named John Preston. He ends up missing his dose and begins to feel, and then pulls what I would probably refer to as a Fredder Fredersen for those of us who watch Metropolis, where he just goes out to help the resistance and starts a revolt against the government. And along the way, we get some entertaining martial arts, gun battles, or gun fu, as it's affectionately dubbed. A little splash of what we could call teenage hormones, which we may talk about at some point with how he transitions into feeling and some of the actions that he takes. And then at the very end of the film, what I can only describe as the gun porn orgasm of action that takes place, where just all hell breaks loose and it's just a free-for-all. But who am I kidding? Like, the best character of this film, if you're watching YouTube and you're seeing our video, is this dog that's behind me, this awesome puppy that John encounters and protects, and yes, will make it through the entire film, is by far the best character, hands down.
That was a sigh of relief for me.
Yeah, I will fight you on that if you say that this dog is not the best character in this film. No. But you know what, all that aside, we're here to talk about, you know, where we've seen a lot of the influences in this film before, whether it works, whether the film pays, you know, decent homage, whether we think it's a blatant ripoff, or whether we think it doesn't stick the landing. So first, let's get some initial impressions from those of us in the house that have seen it or have not seen it before. And Chris, since you have seen it before, I figure it's your turn to go ahead and tell us a little bit about your second, third, however many viewings this is since you've gone back to fight against the Tetragrammaton.
Yeah, so you just general impressions, is that we're kind of starting with?
Yeah. What's your thought process after seeing this because you said you hadn't seen this for a while, is that right?
Yeah, since college, which I know is kind of our mantra for you and I, it seems like for a lot of the movies, but I watched it a lot in college. I'd say I probably saw this 5 or 6 times, like easily in college. It was like a easy pick, like, I don't know, to kind of slap on in the background. So it hadn't been since then. I think this movie's still a good laugh. Like I enjoyed it. Like it's a lot of fun, right? I think it does raise some interesting questions, and we talked a bit in our watch party. Like, this was very close to 9/11, and it seems to kind of raise a lot of issues around sacrificing like personal freedom for safety, which would have been a very hot topic at the time. So kudos for that. I think what it's lacking at times is depth. I don't know that like, depending on, it doesn't really seem particularly interested in being deep. So like, there's kind of the question of whether or not it cares, like how deep it kind of goes, right? I think you could argue that maybe the agenda of the film is to ask some questions, have a bit of like philosophical slant to it, but mostly be there sort of for the action. Like, that's more of the backdrop for some of the high concept action and things like that. But I still think it's a solid movie. Like, it is one that I would give with probably a bit of a disclaimer of like, hey, like, so if you're expecting something like Solaris or like Gattaca or like something that's like a little deeper, like, temper your expectations. If you just want to show up and have fun, it's got that in spades. So that's my read.
That is a valid point. I will say, I mean, when I first saw this film, so the reason that I watched this film the first time, and this will be really short and sweet, was I was back in high school and I saw it at a video kiosk somewhere. And what caught my eye was not only the cover, but the fact that the little tagline at the bottom of it says, "Forget the Matrix. This movie will blow you away." And I thought, you know what? That is a very bold claim to make, because the Matrix had come out in what, 99 or 2000, somewhere in there. And so I thought, all right, I'll give it a shot. If I'm going to see some cool, martial arts style, action and all that. So I think that's sort of what you're talking about, where it has enough of like a, whether it's philosophical, whether it's religious, sort of like the same vein with the Matrix, where it's like we're not going to be as deep as what they were trying to go for, but we're going to have that as sort of the backdrop with which to carry the plot forward, and then we're just going to have all these cool gun battles in there, and that's how we're gonna market it. So
I will add, I think it lacks originality too. Like, I think it borrows from a lot of things. I don't think it says anything really new or explores anything new within that genre. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that like a bit more like in detail. But
oh yeah. But how about you, May? What are your takes on the film?
It's a very serious film that at the same time does not care at all about like plot holes or consistency. And I kind of love that, honestly. Like, I feel like the comedic elements of like the over the top action scenes and how unrealistic the very premise of the movie is, like, I don't know, they kind of like work to its favor. It makes it so you're not questioning or looking too deep because you know that there's nothing there. It's easier just to enjoy the ride. That puppy is probably the cutest dog I've ever seen on like TV also, so like that was obviously a plus. But yeah, no, I don't know if this makes me a terrible person or not, but I was laughing during every fight scene.
no,
Yeah,
you're not a terrible
good.
person. You're an awesome person. That's exactly what you should be doing.
Because it was ridiculous, and so it is perfectly acceptable. And it's one of those things where it's why I like going back and watching it again, is just because I know how ridiculous it is, and yet watching them all play it so straight is part of why I find it so entertaining. Like Christian Bale, man, like if it wasn't for him just such a straight face through the entire film, like I don't know, it could have been a completely different movie.
He's so intense.
Yeah, absolutely, man, that man is in it. And I don't know if this came out back when Sci-Fi Channel was doing a lot of its like original picture programming that was like all the B sort of campy sci-fi sort of horrors, or sort of
what do
like
you mean
sci-fi
campy? Croctopus versus Mega Shark? Like, it's not campy.
Hell yeah, Sharknado, baby. I don't know if that was when that started to become like a thing. I feel like it was the beginning of it, because this has the feeling of that without being Sci-Fi Channel, or whether it's the kind of subpar special effects, or if it's just like we're taking something very obviously done before, like what Chris was saying, and just repackaged it in a different way, which I feel like Sci-Fi Channel was notorious for doing. Or like a lot of these other straight to DVD, or now straight to streaming B movies that you see out there by like these sort of discount production companies. So I mean, that's sort of in the vein of where this film is going. So definitely. Any other initial thoughts or impressions before we kind of jump into some of these homages, for better or worse?
I think we'll probably get into this more later if we're talking about themes of the film, but I thought it was interesting, just that like with a premise that it introduces, and like the lack of any recognizable like ideology or religion. There's iconography that's clearly like very not Nazi-esque, but beyond that, it seems very much kind of like resisting it being compared to anything in the real world. And I feel like that also kind of frees it to have what, especially like immediately after 9/11, would be a very controversial plot of, hey, actually, no, this government sucks and we're just going to kill everyone in charge and take it over.
It's true. I feel like it's sort of I guess to kind of play it safe, it's, at least back then, it was always easy to just use like Nazism as like the enemy. And so it's like, we're just going to make we're going to have the government be a bunch of Nazis, and then overthrowing it will seem more palatable for people around this time, not to have to worry or think about it too much. Like, yes, I side with these guys. And
make the point of resistance emotions a thing that is universal to human experience.
Exactly.
I think to like arguably a more like interesting degree. Like V for Vendetta kind of does the same thing, where like
Yeah.
it takes Bush era politics and kind of merges it with like a very clearly like fascist government, and says essentially like, hey, this is what's going on like right now, and like we're gonna kind of put this like sci-fi package around it, and you're almost compelled, like you have to kind of like, yeah, this looks terrible, and it's like, this is what's happening right right now. So
It's actually a
I-
really good comparison. I would say this is doing kind of a similar thing.
Although I would say the Wachowskis have a tendency, like V for Vendetta or The Matrix, I find them much more like able to stick the landing when it comes to making connections like that are, you know, without it either going too overboard necessarily. That's arguable. There's some other films they've done where you may or may not feel the same way, but I feel like those two in particular were very much we feel okay pushing the envelope, and we feel okay, you know, having a lot of stuff that's on the screen that can be interpreted in one or more ways, and then but also not feel afraid to do that. And so that's something that I really appreciate about those films. So let's talk a little bit about the stuff that has been repackaged. So let's since we've talked about Metropolis at length before, I feel like it's worth just making a couple of notes about that to kind of segue in. At least from what I've noticed. So like the architecture of the city, you know, the big mega city, clothing is all very reminiscent of Metropolis. Everybody has like varying degrees of like gray and white. It's even to the point that you guys notice where like the interior of a car is just like straight white. Some of the clothing is straight black. Some of the workers, it's like, I don't know, like navy blue maybe is like the most out of the box kind of color that we get, and everything else is just very bland, which makes sense. You know, it's not supposed to elicit any sort of emotion, or it has no utility behind it with color, and so that's all sort of, except if you're getting burned and then you have like a Blessed Be clothing style going on there, Handmaid's Tale style, where right before you get put in the incinerator. So there's that, and then sort of like the revolt that takes place as well, which seems to be pretty consistent with Metropolis there. So May, I'm gonna flip it back over to you on this one, on anything else, like whether it's about those aspects of it that you kind of saw mirrored in Metropolis, whether there was anything else that was interesting that might have been integrated from that film here too, and if you think it worked or didn't work.
I don't think it's a one-to-one, you can tie them together. But it's another common sci-fi theme is when you get a really authoritarian society like this, generally you have kind of a melding of religion with the society. And in Metropolis, we saw how kind of like the machine version of Mary was also the embodiment of like all these sins, right? And there's the flip side of the coin, the human Mary was very much kind of a Virgin Mary figure leading everyone to some kind of salvation, right? And I think you see a very similar kind of melding of politics and religion in Equilibrium, notably with like Father being the head of the clerics, the fact that they're called clerics, and that they're also like the head police / assassins of the government. So that's kind of an interesting through line there. I wish there had been like a cool robot lady, but alas, no.
If only the unproduced sequel, Equilibrium 2, that would have had the yes, Robo Maria would have showed up. They did have a couple little winks though. I felt like, you know, when John gives a little wink over to Taye Diggs' character at one point, and kind of vice versa. So I got a little Metropolis vibe there, since Maria liked to do that a lot, where that was
true.
like one of the big shots. But yeah, I like that. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, the only additional thing that really springs to mind, and it's not a one for one, like obviously because we don't have like the head and the hand, but like Christian Bale very much is the heart. Like he's somebody who was part of not really the upper echelon, but like part of the government, sort of like has seen that side of it, and I think is put forth as the character that's going to bridge the old way and the new way and sort of help things move along. Obviously much more violent than Frederson, and again, like it's not a one-to-one, but I do think you kind of see that, like, you know, his interactions, like he's able to navigate both of those worlds and understands it in a way that probably very few people do. That's it.
And it's interesting that both sides kind of see an advantage to his in-between role. Like the rebellion wants him as an assassin, and there's that whole like late movie reveal where father's like, oh yeah, I planned all this. I let you feel emotions, that way you could infiltrate them.
Yep, spoiler alert. Was my plan all along, sucker. Yeah, it's true. Which I feel like is sort of nowadays is very much like we expect that. I feel like maybe back when this film was done, audiences could kind of go along maybe to a certain extent and have that be a twist at the end. But I feel like it's so done. Now we just sort of expect everybody in all these dystopian sci-fis to just backstab each other all the time. There's always that expectation of having the plot twist at the end of the episode or at the end of the film, or even like multiple points throughout the point of the story, that it's almost like we're just waiting for like somebody to change and there to be like a twist at that point. I mean, I could be misreading that now, but I just sort of, I feel like that's always, now it's like they're upping the ante every time to do that.
No, I remember frequently, like at Man in the High Castle and Handmaid's Tale, like the two shows that are probably most analogous to this that I've watched, like that are, you know, recent or I don't know, like current, frequently was paranoid of like everyone's intentions, that like wasn't the main character or focal character who actually is good, who is going to be a snake in the grass that's going to reveal themselves in the 11th out of 12 episodes at the cliffhanger moment, you know, kind of thing. Like, so I think you're right. Like maybe our guard was up a little bit less back in 2002, right? 2002, you said?
Yeah. Yep. Oh man.
Either someone's going to betray you or someone is secretly your father. It's going to be one or the other.
Yeah.
Solid.
It's true. Why not both, you know?
Ever since Star Wars, man. And speaking of actually, like, so Handmaid's Tale, or Man in the High Castle, also 1984, Fahrenheit 451 are like the classic. I feel like these are the two films that are like represented the most in, or either books and or films, depending on which version you've seen or read, are the most depicted / repurposed and maybe even just blatantly ripped off in this film, because we've got the burning of all the, whether it is books at some point, but also just all the pieces of artwork, in the hole at the beginning where we see them torch like the inside of this house, or which again, Fahrenheit 451 written all over that, or even just taking, when John takes a book secretly to look at later, that's also very much a callback to Fahrenheit 451. Then we've got 1984, which is the totalitarian big brother government, which in this film kind of does and doesn't do a good job of spying, depending on how you look at it and you want to argue it. But that's, or having like little children standing sentry pointing out people that they think are feeling and having them be sent in for interrogation. Those were definitely the things that came to my mind. But Chris, how about for yourself? Watching this, was that a lot of what you saw reflected in there? Were there other aspects maybe between those films that you thought were there, and do you think that it worked or didn't really work?
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example, but like there's definitely like some double speak in this, or like phrases that were a little bit reminiscent of some of the classic lines and mottos in 1984. The spying thing was very odd to me. Like watching last night, I'm like, so they have the capability of like tracking people's like guns, yet they don't really seem to utilize that. Like you would think, like very clearly a cleric has slaughtered a group of guys out in the Narrows, right? The Narrows. And
Yep.
How many could they have that they couldn't just run everyone's guns to be like, who was popping off last night? So I found that aspect very odd. Like, and just you pointed out, like this is clearly an advanced society with technology, and they're using like pen and paper logbooks, just some weird stuff like that. But no, like certainly like the Hitler Youth stuff, like children that are like the spies, reminded me a lot of 1984, kind of putting the responsibility on everybody to like report and all be compliant, and everyone watching, you know, everybody else. very 1984-esque. It's been a hot minute since I've read Fahrenheit 451. I feel like maybe as like long ago as like 7th grade for me, or 8th grade. I probably should reread it because I love Bradbury, but certainly like the attitude towards art and really any kind of creative endeavor being something that's potentially dangerous, and the need for censorship or just sheer destruction. But yeah, the thing that I don't know if we're going to talk about it, the work that really stuck out to me was Brave New World, the drug soma, and that's really used to kind of like level out and not fully eliminate emotions like this, but is very much used as a way to keep people docile. That was the most striking, but both the first time I saw it and again last night. And that was another work I was like, man, I'm due for a reread of that, because that blew my mind the first time I read it. I love Brave New World. I think it's underrated compared to the other two that you mentioned, Fahrenheit 451 and 1984. I think it stands up there with those, but doesn't get as much love.
Excellent. Well, then we're going to hold on to that then and circle back in just a moment. May, any thoughts about 1984 and Fahrenheit 451?
I don't have too much to add. I do think the biggest influence is, like Chris was saying, just this kind of panopticon that you have, where everyone's kind of enforcing for each other. The most jarring thing for me is something that's not like that obvious, but like feels very unsettling, especially if you've ever been in kind of like a toxic relationship or anything like that, where you feel like you're in a panopticon, is someone just walking up and being like, what are you doing? Like right now, what are you doing? Because I think that happened, like Christian Bale's kid asks that at one point, and his partner does as well at another time, and it's like, that's a very panic inducing question, right? Even if you're not doing anything suspicious, it's just like someone demanding, what are you doing right now? I'm not really connecting that to either of those books. Anyway, that to me was kind of the strongest example of like, oh, that's just a question everyone is expected to ask of each other and instantly answer with no emotion. That is rough.
Especially if you're trying to fake that you're feeling emotions.
No kidding. I actually saw a lot of similarities to a Vonnegut short story called Harrison Bergeron. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but Chris, you like that, right? Yeah,
I do.
Because it's a similarly authoritarian state with the great equalizer being like, adding weights to the answers so that they all have like the same like limits on their movements, and just it felt like a very similar society. Obviously this is just a tiny short story, but I feel like the creators of the movie probably read it at some point.
Excellent. That's actually a book I haven't read, or a short story I haven't read, so that will be added to the list. And I have read maybe bits and pieces of Brave New World, which has been on the list for me to get back to because I'm lazy. So I'm glad that we are talking about this, because this is giving me a good book selection for later. So let's circle back then to Brave New World. And Chris, tell me a little bit more about what you saw in that reflected here in the film.
Yeah, it's, again, been a long time since I've read it, but just the idea that through psychoactive drugs you can control the masses by essentially making everybody very placid, all the time. Where they kind of go a little further than Brave New World, like I think, is like there is also like the threat of extreme violence, so that's kind of the backup plan when somebody doesn't want to take their meds. But just the fact that that's the easiest solution to keep everybody in line. I will add, what I would have liked to have seen a bit more like on that angle is like some clear motivation, like on like, is it resource scarcity, is it just power, like where is the motivation? And like we obviously get like the late third act like reveal of who Father actually is and all of that, but like I was 100% sold on where all the motivations lay and all that, other than just like sheer control. But yeah, that was the primary, just psychoactive drugs being the most efficient method, and the fact that everyone's kind of taking them willingly, it's very reminiscent of Brave New World as well. Like that's something that most people are not coerced into doing. It's like, oh yeah, like this is just what you do. This is how you live your best life.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, guys, for that. Then I guess the next point to look at then is the action. So the reason that everybody came here presumably was to watch all the awesome gun battles and see some martial arts and see what can happen when you combine drug therapy with Tai Chi to create the ultimate badass. But the gun kata, or the gun fu, I guess they call it the gun katas in the film. And then the gun fu, that is like I guess the affectionate term that everybody who's watched this film has talked about, seeing that is on display, is very reminiscent. I guess it was trying to compete with the Matrix, essentially. I mean, not just on what I saw on the cover that was arguing about that, but just the trying to take a story that had some sort of serious, underlying plot, and then just like throw in all that action to break it up or to carry the plot forward. And we see bits and pieces of that sort of scattered throughout the film that culminates in that big action sequence at the very end. So I'd kind of like to get your thoughts on just sort of the action sequences themselves, what you thought might have been taken from somewhere else versus the Matrix, or whether you thought it was basically just watching the Matrix repurposed, and then kind of going from there. So May, how about I kick it over to you for your thoughts on that?
I learned an important lesson from these action scenes, and it's always have an insane number of guns up your sleeve. Like, that's how you win any fight, apparently.
And reloading, like extra clips, make sure those are there.
I just like the like scientist / engineer in me is like, how how did he do all the reloads and like the extra mechanical little bits? How was that not just like so bulky and
why are there
like,
no metal detectors? Like, why is that not a thing? Yeah.
I like want Mythbusters to look at this, basically, is my feeling.
Oh man, I'm surprised they haven't. I would totally watch an episode about that.
They might have. I've definitely not seen every episode of Mythbusters, so who knows? Adam, Jamie, if you're listening, please.
We'll tweet you. Please do an Equilibrium one. We hope there's still time.
Yeah, no, I was really amused by them. I think like the role of like martial arts in like sci-fi movies is interesting. I'm a Trekkie, so I'm gonna tie it back to like it was a common thread in a lot of like Star Trek episodes of like doing sparring, like martial arts sparring as practice. Even though almost every altercation is decided with phasers, right? But
I'll say Kirk, he had that sick judo chop that he would do. Like, that was his
true.
Oh yes, or like the two-handed ones are just like yeah.
Yeah. So in addition to the Matrix, that's kind of where my mind went. But yeah, like I said, they're enjoyable. I did not take them seriously whatsoever. I also like, I know the flash of gunfire is always exaggerated in film, but I was dying during that opening scene where he's shooting in the dark and it's like a camera flash every time he shoots.
It's true. I don't know if you guys picked up on it too, but like the weird sort of like special effect that they did every time you hear like the whoosh with his arms changing position, and it was like this really sort of unrealistic visual, like his arms moved in a weird way, versus like his entire body is a ramrod still, and it's just like this one arm goes one direction, the other arm like loops around the back of his head, and then he switches, and it's just like and I get that it's, again, martial arts, I get it, but like, it's just so ridiculous. And I mean, even if that's how the body's moving, that's visually how they want it, because of it being in the dark. And for us, I guess, is to be able to see that movement, that it's so like unrealistically accentuated that way. But yeah, so Chris, thoughts from your end as well about the fighting style, or just generally as it relates to the plot, to drive the plot forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the strongest points of the film. Like, believe it or not, like, yeah, it's very silly. But I did a bit of research, and Gung Fu is actually like a subgenre of like Hong Kong cinema. So like, think John Woo movies, where there's that sort of stylized, especially akimbo, so like dual wielding like things, is very much like a part of that like, you know, subgenre of like action cinema from, and again, John Woo is probably like the most famous director that really implemented it. And I think this movie does a decent job like putting its own spin on that. It is very silly. Under any kind of scrutiny, it falls apart, but it doesn't really matter because it looks cool. And I think largely they pull it off. Like, is it plausible? Like, fuck no. I love some of the engineering that you have to just kind of go like, sure. Like the little clips that like are like the little punchy toys that you had as a kid that like couldn't fall over, you know, like when he slides them on the ground, they're just perfectly upright. Sure, yeah. I mean, for the sake of the movie, it's cool because you're like, okay, those aren't bombs. Like, why aren't they? And then like a minute and a half later, he just slams, and you're like, okay. You just knew that you were going to be there at some point and needing to reload. That makes sense. You can, if you suspend your disbelief and just go with it, I think it's cool. Like, I mean, it really is like dopey and fun, and I think it is one of the strongest, but probably one of the things that sets this film apart, honestly, like where it lacks originality in a lot of other aspects, I think it does put a really good spin. So if we were doing a deja vu on like Hong Kong like gun fu, like I might feel a bit more strongly about the originality than maybe I will when we talk about dystopian slant on things. So yeah.
I'm curious, Chris, in your research, did you find like what is upheld as like the prime example of Hong Kong gun fu?
Yeah, so I think is it The Killers, like the John Woo film that had, is it Chow Yun Fat was like his big star? Let me go, like, because I remember seeing that in college and being completely blown away. Yeah, The Killer singular is the film that like where that dual akimbo thing, and it was Chow Yun Fat. Maybe I'll insert a clip right here so we can see like a little comparison between them. But
I certainly hope that you do, because that is awesome, and I would watch more films about that.
Well, I mean, if you've never seen some like early John Woo, like not Mission Impossible 2 John Woo, but like when he was like on fire, really like, you know, passionately working like in Hong Kong, it's some of the best action films like you'll ever see. And like the influence, one of those things that you're like, holy God, like this guy influenced so many things that came after this. So he also made Face Off. So like you think like absurdity, like if we're going to loop this all back around to absurd action, you have to suspend your disbelief. Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, when they're on that high speed boat chase and they both jump and just collide midair and they're fine. They're like fighting in seconds, where like you're going 60 miles an hour and you slam into each other in the air and you're totally fine. Like that's kind of what, that subgenre of action involves, like stuff like that, where you're like, there's no way, but you don't care because you know what you're in for.
That's valid. I do like in the film in Equilibrium how they try to justify it, and they've got like a little compilation explaining how it works, and then there's like all these different graphs of like geometry for like, oh yeah, these angles and stuff, and I'm like, this looks like something that like high school me would have taken away from geometry class and just like scribbled away as a reason for why this works. Like, yes, because math.
Don't doubt the science. Are you anti-science, Will?
No, I'm questioning their math. So I would like to see statistically, like the other stuff we've talked about, like, is it like the stuff he's got up his sleeves, you know, logistically, if that could work, or, you know, maybe some of the fighting styles, if that's able to pull off something where, you know, where you've got a gun that is discharging, and could you still like do martial arts moves, especially at the very end with the like sort of the boss level, as Chris liked to refer to it last night, where he's fighting off against the real father. John Preston is fighting off against the real father, and they're essentially doing like, I'm not going to say necessarily like what, I don't really know which style of martial art it would have been, but just the fact that they are in close quarters combat and they are trying to like point a gun at each other, and the other one's just sort of like slipping in and pushing it aside and slipping their other arm in and pushing it aside, and they keep deflecting each other, and they're discharging their firearm at the same time they're doing it, and it's like, it's just so fluid and flawless, and it's like, would that really have been possible, or is this just, again, suspending disbelief for the sake of it?
As somebody who's fired many handguns, and those are Desert Eagles that they're shooting, so it's either a 357 caliber or 50 caliber. No, it is not. Yeah. I can tell you right now, like, they kick like mules. Kickback. There's no way.
Also, they seem to have unlimited bullets at certain points.
Yeah, I stopped trying to count at one point. I was like, just out of curiosity, and I was like, no.
Yeah. Well, all right, so before we sort of like tie this all together to decide whether this is like it works as an homage or it doesn't really work, I do like to point out this one little thing that's come up before, and I mentioned it to you guys during our screening together, which is that there's a little, I mean, the editing's a little inconsistent in this film too, which is, for better or worse, you could either ride with it and just go along with it for the sake of the plot, or you can look at it and be like, okay, so how does this make sense? And it could be because they edited some scenes in a different order, or they just weren't paying attention. Could be either way at this point, but there's definitely a part in the film where a little reveal is that one person has been using another character's weapon and thus is able to use that to justify incriminating them. And I just thought that it was funny that going back and rewatching the order of events that take place, depending on where you line up in that, I mean, there's definitely some firearm exchanges, like handing off of weapons to each other throughout the course of this, but it's still like, it's one of those things where it doesn't really line up for me. And so that's always entertaining rewatching it to try and think, oh, maybe I'll find that one part that maybe it could have lined, it would have made sense. And then it always, no, I come to the same conclusion every time. So I don't know if that was ever, I guess, something that you guys noticed that was an issue, or whether you were just like, this is funny, let's just ride along with it. So either of you two want to throw in your thoughts on that, or not really a big deal?
I mean, I noticed pretty much immediately when they did like the big gun swap reveal that, wait, no, that happened after they shot that whole gang of guys. But also it was so late in the movie, I was just like, yeah, it's fine.
Yep,
Part of
our
me, after
protagonist is
reflecting
safe.
on this last night, like wanted to just believe that since they already were like, the whole thing was like a trap anyway, like they later reveal that they're on to him anyway, like he's supposedly putting Tay Diggs away and he screams to make a big show. Part of me just wants to believe that, like, they're like, you know what, just let him have this, like the logic of this doesn't make sense. You know what, just we're gonna arrest him later anyway, like, sure, like let's give him a little victory, like he's done so well up to this point, like sarcastic, like, sure, yeah, the old switcheroo, you got me. Arrest him. Christian Bale's like, yes. But no, I think it's just one of those things that just doesn't hold up like a lot of this movie when you think about it too much. But
yeah, or just the moments in it where people seem to be emoting when they shouldn't be emoting, and then justifying it as like at somebody else, so yeah, there's stuff you can poke fun at a lot of it.
There's that, and also like ostensibly in this world it's still okay to like have a wife and kids, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I don't believe that in the process of like making a baby you have had no emotional spike that whole time.
It's true. Like, how do you have children? Speaking of, how do you procreate when nobody has emotion? Is it just like, is it like Brave New World? Are we like test tubing this out, or like what's the process?
Sounds miserable, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yep. Who knows? I suppose that would probably be the most like logical guess, is that maybe it is like not something that involves actual like intercourse and is more like lab oriented.
But it's still like expected or fine to be married, and that because I think in Brave New World the kids are basically raised by the state, right? Like,
I think so.
Yeah,
it's been a while, but yeah, that sounds right. I think maybe like again, like I could be assigning or giving this movie too much credit. It could be like that's pairing people means that like there's always eyes on like somebody, right? So
yeah,
government's like,
which then when they're all like, why did you not know when your wife was a sex offender, John, and suddenly he's under scrutiny for that, like, yeah, that actually makes a little bit more sense to me then. All right, guys, before we wrap up, any final thoughts, points about the film?
Yeah, I would still recommend this to somebody, again with a little bit of a disclaimer, like but as far as like outside of the discussion around genre and stuff, I think it's held up mostly well. Like some of the stuff's a bit aged in it, but like I enjoyed this way more last night than I thought I was going to. I'll be honest. Like I was convinced that this movie wasn't going to hold up at all, and I think for what it is, it's absolutely fine.
So I guess tying that in, are we doing like a final vote then for whether we think this does a good homage, whether it the purpose it sets makes sense, whether it adds something to it, or simply just serves as a good reflection of the material that it's sourcing it from, or how do we want to wrap this up?
I don't know. I just say like everybody can. I think we do a good job when we put our own individual spin or judging criteria. So if you're for it, I just say let everybody kind of say their piece, and it doesn't have to be a binary answer by any means if you don't want it to be. But I'm also down to make a judgment call too. So
Cool. Well, then I will leave it up to everybody to say their piece and how they think the film stacks up. So, Chris, since we already kind of got your feedback from it, do you want to go ahead and wrap up your end, and then we'll head over to May?
yeah, I don't think this film, as I've kind of already been saying, like I don't think this film is a very great entry into the dystopian sci-fi like genre, right? If I'm going to evaluate it on that merit alone, I think this movie is unsuccessful in every way of doing anything interesting or adding anything new to what came before it. I think it pays decent homage, so I think it is successful in like being aware of what came before, and like if its entire job is to pay homage, I think it does a decent job at that. Like it maybe not being original, but paying homage. And I think that's the ultimate question, right? Like, does it do a decent job paying homage? Like thinking back to like Knives Out, I think where Knives Out is like far and above this is that it does something new and it has an interesting twist, but it also pays homage. So I would say I would rate this moderately successful in the homage category. So that's my final answer.
All right, May, what are your thoughts?
Chris, I'm going to be copying your homework because my answer is basically the same. Yeah, I think it's a great homage to the genre. I went back and forth on how I felt about the very kind of like surface level teenage hormone driven like just shoved in their romance plot with Mary towards the end. I decided I do like it in that I feel like not all, and certainly not the great like sci-fi films I can think about, but a common trope in sci-fi is very one-dimensional women and implausible romances. So I kind of like that this had one after all, if we're just talking about it being an homage. I don't know if I was muted or not, but I cried out when like they have like that moment in the interrogation room where she just tried to kill him for killing her lover, and then she's like, oh, but you're hot.
Yeah. But you're Christian Bale, so it's okay,
right? I screamed at my TV, but
is that a throw your popcorn moment?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
At the end of the day, that is a proper homage to the genre. So yes, I agree. This is a great job of kind of wrapping up a lot of sci-fi dystopia themes. It did not really add anything. I think, like, if anything, like I'm not used to seeing gun fu in a lot of those sci-fi dystopia movies. That it's certainly present in some, but that felt like the most different aspect of the film. But it's still derivative. So, at the end of the day, have the same answer as Chris.
No, actually, so I will admit I have watched this film quite a lot over the last probably 15 years. And I think it's just because it is so much like a popcorn flick for me, where I could turn it on and I don't have to pay attention to it. And it's not like you guys have talked about, and this is going to reflect a lot of what you've already said, is that it's not very deep, that it's not really meant to be in a lot of ways. It could have been because of the time when it came out, or it's simply because that was not the focus of what the film was supposed to be. That we came for action, and that's how we're going to market it, and that's what we're going for. And I think that it's fun. I think it's fun to poke fun at. And I think it does a good job of copying and repurposing a lot of classic sci-fi for the sake of the plot, but then trying to be, as we sort of have consistently said, it tries to be a little bit more unique in its sense of the fighting that's going on. That is sort of the focal point of it. And so I think that in terms of the entertainment value, I think it's definitely entertaining, but I don't think that well, I should say, I think it's entertaining. I think it does a good job of trying to pay respects to the material that it's taking from. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it ultimately, like you guys have also said, I don't think it adds very much. I would recommend watching it as something after the fact, like, hey, you should watch this movie and then go watch Equilibrium so that you understand what they're pulling from, so that it makes sense as to why it's like sort of spoofing, but not really. It's in that really weird gray area where it's trying to be, it's trying to play it straight, but at the same time, by playing it straight, it is very funny. And so I think for that, and also having grown up and appreciated it still as just being entertaining and fun, that's where I stand on it too. So
yeah, it's certainly no Brazil. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Brazil, the
oh
Terry Gilliam
man,
film.
yeah, that's a great film too.
Oh, Monty Python meets 1984. That's a brilliant movie. That's a movie that really, really like tackles. It's dark. It's darker. Like, I'm making it sound maybe a bit more silly than it is. Very funny, but it also has very dark moments. But like, that's, I think, like where you can go. Like, that's a film that pays homage and kind of elevates.
Okay, so budget trivia. This is a pretty straightforward one. Do you think Equilibrium had a budget of 30 million? True or false? And if false, over or under?
Under. Gonna be decisive today. Under.
Okay.
I don't know, it had Christian Bale in it. He was probably pretty expensive even back then.
This was about 2 years before The Prestige, I think.
Well, like I said, I'm not good with math, so I'm just gonna wing it because I didn't want to cheat and look this up beforehand. I'm gonna go with right at 30 million.
Chris is correct. It was under. It was actually only 20 million somehow.
Oh, okay.
Surprisingly low for me.
Yeah, I wasn't too far off.
You'd think getting such a well-behaved dog would have cost a lot.
So
That's priceless. You
cute.
can't put a price on that dog,
Precious
honestly.
little doggo. For our listeners, that was the moment I wanted to have a dog, and I was not a dog person up until probably a few years back when my wife got a dog and I became a dog person. But before that, that was the only dog I'd ever seen where I thought, you know what, I could make an exception. That dog looks adorable. So well, guys, it's been a pleasure talking with you about Equilibrium. I think it is time to wrap it up with a little game. All right, Chris. So do you want me to give you some options when it comes to a character or the plot?
Plot.
So your options are blank, or whatever that's going to be, goes on a quest to slay a dragon, goes undercover in the world of hip hop culture, or throws a bachelor or bachelorette party that goes terribly wrong.
I'm gonna say bachelorette party that goes wrong. Seems like there's good comedic fodder there.
All right, buddy. So if we're going with that, the bachelorette party that goes terribly wrong. So you got 1 minute on the clock, and your character is a soccer mom determined to help her kids win the big game.
Okay. So we have our soccer mom named Karen, total coincidence, who is trying to plan a bachelorette party for her best friend Janice, all the while trying to figure out a way to help her kids win the big game. How do things go wrong? Well, when you're at a bachelorette party, you're consuming copious amounts of alcohol, and mistakenly, Karen books a stripper to come not to her house, but to the soccer game. Right?
All right.
Parents
all right. I'm gonna have to stop you right there, buddy. All right. So I like where you're going with this, but just tell me how about, and bear with me, how can we tie in with the Harry Potter franchise?
Oh, perfect. This takes place in the wizarding world. Okay. And this becomes a race against time. So Karen's actually so drunk, she thinks it's a soccer match. It's a Quidditch match. She has to try to figure out a way to stop the en route wizarding stripper from just, Accio clothes, like out into the stratosphere, exposing himself to a bunch of underage children. So she's on an intercept course.
All right.
On the broomstick.
All right. That's good, man. That's good. We'll take this under advisement and we'll get back to you on that.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome.
I was dying.
Oh, this game's so hard. I forgot how hard it is.
So much fun. All right, May, it is your turn. What do you wish to have an option over? Would you like to say on
gonna-
your character or your plot?
I'm going to be a bit different. I want to know my character.
Excellent. So your character options are a sad, sad orphan looking for a new family, a divorced dad trying to reconnect with his kids, or a plucky, down on her luck actress.
I'm going to have to go with the divorced dad.
Noise. Your plot for your divorced dad trying to reconnect with his kids will be on a deadly whitewater rafting trip.
All right. Picture this. You have Mr. Dad, played by Danny DeVito. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt. He's wearing a helmet because he's going to go rafting. And he has the sickest pair of sunglasses. And little known to his ex, he's decided that instead of taking the kids to the zoo, he's going to take them whitewater rafting. Unfortunately, these are two very meddlesome kids who have some issues with the divorce. And they decide to cause all kinds of havoc on the raft and end up getting lost in the waters.
So I'm going to have to stop you right there. All right, so they're lost in the waters. I got you. You know what everyone loves? Dolphins. How can we get dolphins in this whitewater rafting fiasco?
Okay, so part of Danny DeVito's way of dealing with a divorce was to go and switch professions and become a dolphin trainer. And as soon as he sees his kids go under, he whistles, and his highly trained dolphins, Flipper and Flopper, come roaring out of the waves. And they find the kids, bring them back. The kids got a 2-for-1, and it was great.
Oh man! All right, so sorry. As much as I would love to see Danny DeVito as a dolphin trainer, because hands down, I would totally. I mean, it's basically going to be like the next Jumanji movie, right? Like, I feel like at some point it's set up for that. We just need The Rock to be in on that. That's close between the two of them. I think I'm gonna have to go with the Bachelorette party. I think I feel like I want to see where that's gonna pan out. So, Chris, I'm gonna go ahead and give
plot
you
a twist where it's like, oh, it's not a soccer game, it's Quidditch.
That was pretty great.
I mean, as much as depending on how you feel about the creator of Harry Potter, and I know we brought this up a time or two.
Maybe the rights will come cheap. She's a.
I'm just saying.
There you go.
We can pay homage to that, a little throwback action there. So awesome, guys, both very well done. I love both of those. All right, Chris, you up for round 2?
I am, and I'll be mad lad and switch it up and do character first this time.
Right. So your character options are a senior citizen swim team, a cop that plays it by the book, or a gang of ruthless Girl Scouts. Don't let my emphasis on any one of those make your decision for you.
Yeah. I'm gonna say senior citizen swim team. Sounds like promising.
Oh yeah. Alrighty, sir. So your plot is a senior citizen swim team tries to break the record for baking the world's largest pizza.
The fuck? Okay. All right. So we have a senior citizen swim team comprised of Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, I think Space Cowboys. Basically, they just recast Space Cowboys, but they're swimmers. And they're tasked with baking the world's largest pizza. How are they going to do that? Well, they're going to win the world championship. They're going to win gold medals, Olympic gold medals. They're up against Michael Phelps, played by Michael Cera. Yep, that's right. I just cast Michael Cera as Michael, or sorry, yeah, as Michael Phelps. And
all right. So that's great. That's great and all. What if we replace the climax of the movie with a drum solo?
Fucking hell. All right, so they get to the big match and they're about to dive into the pool and they're like, wait a minute, y'all are all old as shit, why don't you have a drum off instead? The audience will never see it coming. They roll out a drum set and Clint Eastwood just goes fucking apeshit. I'm talking Neil Peart Rush. All right. Allows them to buy the largest oven ever created to make the world's largest pizza. Will they win or not? You won't know to the sequel. That's how it ends. Ends on a cliffhanger. It's gonna be part two.
Oh
Part
man,
two.
so we're gonna release this out like Stranger Things, or we're only gonna get like half the story now and like the other half in
Think
like
Lord
2
of the
months.
Rings, Lord of the Rings.
Okay, all righty, May.
Jesus.
I'm ready for you.
Don't know how I can follow that up, frankly, but we'll try.
I don't know. The plot didn't. There was no pizza at the end of this film, so I mean, there's always a chance. Are you feeling you want to make a decision about your character or your plot?
I prefer character. I'm showing my DM hat here.
Awesome. All right. So your options are a martial arts master with a troubled past, a fraternity on the verge of suspension, a secret government agency protecting the world from aliens.
Definitely the martial artist.
All right. So your martial arts master with a troubled past must protect their small village from a horde of bandits.
All right. So scene opens. You see this horde of ruffians coming and descending on this very pleasant, idyllic town. And it cuts to this very quaint little cottage where Michelle Yeoh is sitting and just having some soup, having some pasta. She hears the approaching horde. She grabs her guns and she storms out of her cottage to fight the oncoming horde with her trademark gun fu.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. The gun fu is awesome. Michelle Yeoh even better. I like this idea, but I want to be in it. Make me the main character.
So the movie opens with Michelle Yeoh tackling this oncoming horde, and to your horror, she is actually struck down in the first like 30 minutes of the film. This strapping man comes walking out of the alleyway just as she falls, and he has even more guns somehow. He has more than 2 guns in each hand. No one knows how, but he does it.
Oh yeah. All right, that's
and
time.
He defeats the horde.
Oh, epic. These ideas are amazing. I am gonna sound very much well, I obviously if I choose one, it's gonna be because I was in it. But I'm gonna choose the one that I was in for 2 reasons. Well, 3 reasons. I'm gonna go ahead and even assail your ears with this. First off, I was in it, so that was awesome. But that's not to fix it by any means. 2, Michelle Yeoh. Let's just hands down here. Michelle Yeoh in anything, I would watch the shit out of that. So that was once she came into the picture, it was game over at that point. Sorry, Chris.
I think when she left the picture, it was game over.
Even when she left, yeah, in 30 minutes, it was like, you know what, 30 minutes was more than enough. I love Michelle Yeoh. But I will say, there was no pizza at the end of your story. Ultimately, I know the drum thing threw a little kink in it, but I don't know if I want to wait for a sequel to find out about that pizza, man. So
it's part 2. It's not a sequel. It's part 2. No. The difference. No.
But no, I love both of those. So May, I got to give you the point on that.
Thank you.
And I'm also super stoked because I can't wait to see the lightning round and how this is going to turn out. So do you want to flip back over? Chris, you want to lead us off on this one, or do you want to throw a little wild card and have May go again to wrap it up?
Nah.
This is all you.
All right, buddy. So your options are,
don't throw the cards off the table.
I try not to. I know. Oh man, that would be. All right, a fellowship of unlikely heroes. Oh man, Stranger Things. Hunts for Bigfoot.
All right, a fellowship of unlikely heroes hunts for Bigfoot. So who is our fellowship of unlikely heroes? Well, they are Buddhist monks. Why are they hunting Bigfoot? Well, Bigfoot's hunting them. Think Predator, but with Buddhist monks. Why are they in America where Bigfoot is? It should be the Yeti, really, shouldn't it? Well, no one will see that coming. They're on a diplomatic mission to the United States or seminary mission, and suddenly they're out in the woods camping and they're starting to get stalked by
I'm going to stop you right there. So this is good. I like where you're going and where your mind's at. How about let's see if we can set this during the Civil War. Cool.
Oh yeah, amazing. That's why they're camping in the woods. They really don't have much of a choice. Not really the most tolerant nation at that time, so they're having to be very secretive about their mission. Sasquatch starts taking them out one by one, until it's just the last monk and Sasquatch alive, and he is out for blood. He's killed all of his brothers. He thought it was going to be the intolerance of the United States that got him, but it turns out it was fucking Sasquatch. It ends in a epic mano-a-mano battle where he rips the head off of Sasquatch and carries it over his back into the sunset.
Awesome. I know we were a little over time, but I honestly wanted to hear how that was going to turn out. So.
Sorry.
Same.
No,
Same.
You're good. I feel like if I
feel like you should be able to finish your sentence. You know, May, like if you're like finishing your sentence, like I think that's fair game.
I am not going to be a time Nazi, so we're perfectly good on that. All right, May, are you ready?
Okay. I'll ever be.
A young artist struggling to pay rent teaches poor kids to read.
All right, so you have this very pretty young painter living in France, played by Natalie Portman. She, by daylight, is a teacher. She's teaching English to all these little French kids. She is adored by children, adults. The male math teacher fancies her, and by night she spends hours and hours in her painting studio.
I'm gonna stop you right there. So this is great, but what if everything you've said so far was just a flashback before the main story?
There's a deep sadness in your heart, and suddenly everything fades to black, and you realize this was actually just a memory. Natalie Portman, in fact, does not teach. All of her children have grown up and aged out of the school system. They're living in this dystopia where there are no more kids. She has no one to teach. Her art has finally gained popularity, but no one has a taste anymore for the beautiful, idyllic countrysides that she loves to depict. And she ends up living a life in pain and squalor until love saves the day.
Aw, happy ending. Yes.
Tale as old as time. Living in pain and squalor until love saves the day.
All right. Well, May, thank you for that. And guys, I got to tell you, one of the things that's both a joy and also one of the more difficult parts about this is that it is so much fun listening to both of your ideas, especially being able to pivot so quickly with some of the stuff that you get thrown at. I mean, that was why I loved playing the game the last time against Chris, and why it's a joy for me to be able to judge it now. But I'm a big Predator fan, so like throwing that one out there, it was like I know it's like Michelle Yeoh. I'm so biased, so I apologize, but this is the reason why I have to choose that idea, because I would watch the shit out of some Buddhist monks trying to beat the crap out of Bigfoot during the Civil War. And yeah, so I'm totally down. Now that I'm not keen on a love story set in the dystopian future, but I will go with that. So
honestly,
Chris,
I would rather watch Chris's movie than mine too.
All right, buddy. So you better get working on that screenplay, because A24 are going to be calling you soon. So
I know I got projects just stacking up. I'm set.
So, well, guys, thank you so much. Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you to wrap us up. But again, May, Chris, excellent job, both of you. Thank you for playing, and thank you for giving me the pleasure of being able to judge that. So,
yeah, good times.
Thank you for being the game master.
Yeah, that's hard. I want to fucking be the judge next time. Like I sweat so much when I play that. So, all right, here we go. Time to draw our main quest. Gonna give these a little shuffle and drop it. And we have another unicorn or dead horse. And let's see what our film is gonna be here. Oh, dun, 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 dun. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Oh, one of my all-time favorites. Got a little T2 arm back there. So we will be discussing if Terminator 2 Judgment Day is a unicorn or a dead horse. In other words, a sequel that enriches the world or is a big old stinker that does nothing. All right, well, that does it. I'm excited for Terminator 2. You're in for a treat, May. You said you've never seen this before, so boy, like just in for a treat. That's all I'll say. Cool. Well, we appreciate you all tuning in. Please engage with us on social media at ScreenQuestPod. On Twitter is the easiest place to find us. Like, share, subscribe. Don't forget that share part. Like, really, we love the extra love, new listeners. If we have any new listeners on this episode, welcome. And I'm sorry. But no, we do appreciate all the support and in all the interaction. So thank you very much. Until next week. We love you.
Bye, guys.